This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
All right. Good morning, Manny. How you doing, baby? You doing all right?
Doing good. Oh, how are you?
Very good. Can't complain, my brother. There was, somebody was asking me about Moises Alou, and they were just cranking me out because I think that person had heard my stories before. That Moises was the biggest asshole I ever covered in baseball, and I guarantee you've covered all sports like I have.
Yep.
That if I told you who's the biggest asshole you ever covered in sports, it'll come from baseball, I guarantee you. And who was it, Manny Navarro? Who's the biggest asshole you ever covered in sports?
That's a great question. though. I got to give that one a lot of thought because I've had the fortune in my 26 years now, 27 years now in this business to be around baseball, college football, NBA. There's been a ton. I'll tell you this. I can tell you this. The nicest guys, believe it or not, for me anyway, in my experience, have been in the NBA. The guys who you actually can develop some sort of rapport with.
There's a lot of good NBA dudes. Yeah.
There's a lot of good NBA guys. One of my favorite was Kelly Olynyk when he was here with the Heat. Him and Goran Dragic, those two guys, super cool, super down to earth. You could talk about anything with them. Even Dwayne Wade, there were a lot of times I would just go up to his locker and chit chat with him. But definitely baseball, I think you're on the right track. I think most of there's some guys who were just flat out jerks who didn't want to help you do your job whatsoever. They looked at you as the enemy, really for no good reason, because it's not like we really ripped these guys or we weren't the New York media down here.
Did you cover 97? Did you cover Marlins 97?
I was not, because I had been at the Herald only 2 years at that point. I was around the 2003 team more, which
but that was I was around a little bit on that one.
Yeah,
but those kids were young, so they were a lot more,
Right, they were different. They were different for sure.
They weren't affected yet.
It's not Reniel Pinto. Who am I thinking of? Who was the guy who played multiple positions back then? I don't know if it was 97, but the early 2000s. He was kind of a utility guy for them, Hispanic guy. Just was always, when I remember his name, I'll tell you. But I remember his face, and I just can't come up with his name. Was it Alfredo Amezinga? I'm trying to remember.
Oh yeah, Amezinga did play a couple of positions. Yeah.
I think it might have been Amezinga. For whatever reason, this dude just did not like me, and I couldn't figure out why. But every time I was in that locker room, he was just really rude and just an ass for no reason. Right? It was just kind of like I'm gonna be mean to this dude for no reason. And he laughed, and he make the other guys crack up, and so there's listen, in every sport you could find an example or two, but to me, in my experience, and all honesty, I swear to God, to me, there's no organization that handles a lot of this better than the Heat.
Yeah. Well, the Heat normally don't take in bad people. That's the thing about the Heat, that they usually take in pretty good character people overall. Some have kind of slipped through the cracks lately, like Whiteside and things like that. But it's mostly no. But in basketball, my experience is there's a lot of good dudes, in basketball. Baseball is the one that has, and again, I have my theories on that. My theory is that you get to be more well-rounded in the other sports because you get to be exposed to media and things like that. In baseball, in high school, nobody gives a shit about high school baseball. You're not going to get any media attention like you are in football or even basketball. Then you move on to the minors or college baseball. Again, nobody gives a shit. And in college baseball, even if you're in a good college baseball program, what's going to be in the locker room? 2 or 3 people? Not a lot is going to be there to bother you. And then all of a sudden you go to the minors and you're in A ball and B and all this and then all of a sudden you get thrusted into the majors. Mm-hmm. And now for the first time in your life, you've never had to deal with all this media stuff. And I think it becomes quite a challenge, for some of these guys. Plus, they don't get the college education. So they don't get that college experience. And I think that dumbs them down a little bit because a lot of those guys are coming straight out of high school and going into pro ball. So they also aren't developed either in that sense. It reminds me a lot of Patriot assistant coaches. Mm-hmm. As Belichick keeps his Patriot coaches, like Kim Jong-un keeps his citizens locked away from everybody, away from everything. And then all of a sudden, they get a job in the real world and they get
Right.
thrusted in there. And then all of a sudden, McDaniel and Strong and Flores and I'm forgetting another guy that also was a flop. Oh, Patricia. All of a sudden, you thrust them in front of the media, and they just look like complete idiots. You know what I mean? And I think baseball players, to a certain extent, they're kind of sheltered away from all of that stuff, and they don't learn how to grow in the media, and that's why they're kind of rough and edgy when they finally get to the majors. That's just my theory on that.
Well, I agree. I agree with you, and I would say the other aspect is that in baseball, you're never taught to be an individual, right? Whereas in the NBA, you're your own brand, right? You're as a player, you're your own brand. I would say even in football, right? In a lot of ways, those guys know, like the Patrick Mahomes of the world. Hey, I've got my baseball players. Like it's just the mentality of team, team, team. Screw everybody else, and I think that's the world that they grow up in, and so they're not ready to deal with having to brand themselves and carry themselves in public.
Yet they're in the most individual sport out of the team
Yes,
sports that exist.
right.
It's amazing how they had. It's amazing how baseball players haven't gotten Twitter and Instagram and how to promote their sport and all that
Why
kind of
why
stuff.
are they so invisible,
Football,
right? I
soccer,
mean,
and basketball are so ahead. All those players are so ahead of baseball players. It's crazy, dude.
because to me there's no emphasis within these organizations for them to shine as individuals. They really do not have any plan for that. Like the PR people do not. It's never, hey, you're an individual. No, it's the other way around. So
Yeah. Last night, by the way, it just looked like nobody was in UConn's class, really. When you look at it, if you're honest
yeah.
with yourself, nobody was in UConn's class, right?
No, I mean the size, right? I mean to have the kind of length that they have in the post, guys that can just swat shots and keep you out of the paint. I mean that's you have two of those dudes that can do that regularly, you're going to be pretty formidable, really tough to beat. And unfortunately for Miami and the other teams that came across their path, they really were no match for UConn. I think Miami obviously did the best job. They kept it within 10 there in the second half on Saturday night. But that's the kind of team that just is too loaded. And again, it shows you how far away you really are from a national championship for a program like Miami. Yes, you got to the Final Four. But they don't have size. I mean, you look at their roster with Omir and being your big man and playing that small lineup, that only takes you so far. In the end, teams that have size and depth are the ones that win championships, and that's something that Jim Larrañaga has to focus on, I think, here in this offseason is find some more guys that can help him win a championship. They've gotten to this point. We've seen Miami rise over the last 2 years, Elite Eight and Final Four. Now with the transfer portal, go out and find yourself some big men that can win you games in April.
Yeah, no, that and let me tell you, that's the good thing about where they're at because it's multiple 16s, a final 8, now a final 4. So there's a gradual build that's actually going on here.
Yeah,
So it's not like FAU. This is an aberration for them. Now they have to prove that just getting to the tournament is a norm for them. Larrañaga's already proven that getting to the tournament for him is pretty much a norm, throughout his career. And if I'm correct, this was his third Sweet 16, right?
a third or fourth, I think it might have been with Miami.
Fourth if we throw George Mason in, but I mean
Right.
third for the Canes already in his career, right? So that's impressive. And then as of late, he's taking them last year to the Final 8. Now this year he took them to the Final 4. So
Yeah.
he's building on that. Dusty May has to kind of prove that this is the beginning of them kind of getting in the run. As for Larrañaga, it's exactly what you said. This has all been established. Now you've got to try to find that extra edge you need that you were missing to kind of
Right.
complete the puzzle.
Yeah, and look, kudos for what they've been able to do. It's not going to be easy. They have some key guys to replace, right? I mean, Jordan Miller's was a huge, huge,
Money player.
huge piece of their success for them. My guess is a guy like Isaiah Wong is probably going to go pro after winning ACC Player of the Year, and testing the NBA waters the last couple of years. My guess is he'll probably not come back. And then we'll see what happens with Nigel Pack and Norchad. I think those guys would probably be smart to stay in school. Then it's a matter of, can you develop guys around them? Wooga Poplar, I thought, there were points in this tournament where he really popped, and you thought, man, this guy could really be a key player for Miami next year. We'll see what they do with some of the young guys. They signed 4 freshmen in the 2022 cycle. They had a guy in this one, Michael Nwoko, a big man, the only signee in the 23 class. We'll see what happens once he gets on campus. But, this is where you have to keep reloading. If you're going to be a perennial contender like Larrañaga wants him to be, and figure out the right formula. Maybe you play with a little bit more size this year than you did this past year. Maybe you try to build a little bit more depth. So when guys get into foul trouble, you're not afraid to go to your bench at times. So, but I think, look, the program's headed in the right direction. This is the first time any Miami program, in my mind, in the last 20 years has taken real steps towards a championship. And kudos to Larrañaga for being the coach to do that.
Well, you're now playing Larrañaga's style of basketball. So, he's not competing anymore with schools loaded with McDonald's All-Americans. Now it's kind of an even level playing field now, and that's where you kind of like his chances. UConn was a little bit more talented, a little bit more physical. If he can get to that point where he can get a little bit more physical, and he's going to be able to maybe hang a banner one day for the University of Miami. All right, let's get to football. Anything in practices going on that has caught your eye so far?
Yeah, I mean, I did a video last week on the offensive line, and I feel like the one major takeaway you can take away from this spring so far through through the 10 practices and all the injuries of guys being out is that the offensive line is legitimately better in my mind. Mario, between the recruiting, everything that he's done, restocking this roster through the transfer portal, to me, that's the one thing you say, okay, they accomplished a better offensive line in the offseason. That's real. That's not fake. They're going to be an improved unit. Everything else, is really hard to tell. I think Colby Young, sort of emerging as the true number 1 wide receiver on this team. I think that's on the path to happening. I think the linebacker position, I think that's been upgraded. I think Francis Mauigoa's brother Francisco, the older one that came from Washington State, I think he's really developed and taken a step forward at that position, where now you have some more confidence at that position. But what's real and what's not, it's really hard to tell because there's so many guys that have been banged up out throughout camp. James Williams, I know, reportedly came back today to practice. I didn't go out to practice. I was in Orlando over the weekend for the Elite 11.
Did he have shoulder surgery or something like that?
Yeah, he had shoulder surgery and was sort of being brought back along slowly. I think they just want him to get involved and be involved in some of the workouts and the practices. Mario is not rushing anybody back from injury. There's nothing to prove. There's no battles won in spring. This is just, hey, you're healthy. The staff cleared you to come back and practice. Come back and practice. Go through some drills.
Do some conditioning. Stuff. Right.
Yeah. Do a little conditioning. But again, like all of that stuff is so minute. Like if this was the middle of the season, it would be a footnote. All this stuff would be, sort of minor. When we get to the fall, that's when we'll find out who the real starters are at what positions. And, last spring we went through it, the same sort of thing. There were a bunch of guys' names that were flagged. Oh, look at this guy. He's playing at this position. He's doing great. And they never played. They never got on the field because this is the time where guys are healing from injuries and recovering from surgery, etc. So other than the offensive line and the other 2 things I mentioned, linebacker and receiver, there really isn't a lot that's serious to take away from this camp. I think quarterback, maybe Emory Williams, him being a guy that could potentially be a backup this coming season if he continues to develop the way that they want. Passing the guys ahead of him on the depth chart, but overall, man, like I expect Miami to be better on offense, but defense remains to be seen because D tackle is a huge hole in my mind. They got to address that in the transfer portal.
How is Tyler with the new offense? Is he? Because obviously he wasn't comfortable and he wasn't himself last year because the offense was not catered to him. But I would imagine that if you're bringing him back and you made the change, it's because you're trying to also cater to him a lot more. What have you heard about where he's at in the comfort zone of this new offense?
Well, when it comes to Tyler, I mean, he started camp. He was still sort of feeling the after effects of the season, still healing and recovering his body, his shoulder from some of the hits that he took. But I think as camp has settled in, as he's got a chance to learn this offense, and Shannon Dawson said they were going to implement probably 65, 70% of this offense here in camp. I think I think he likes what he's playing in. From what I've been told, he likes the system. This is much more quarterback friendly. This is much more Tyler Van Dyke friendly. Much more of the kind of offense he ran the last 6 games of the 2021 season when he was the ACC Rookie of the Year. So from a quarterback friendly offense, this is the type of system he can thrive in. And I think he's got, like I mentioned, a better offensive line. I think Colby Young is stepping into that number 1 receiver role, but there's still a lot of unknowns. He needs to get his tight end back. Elijah Arroyo has to come back. He's been out all spring. We got to see how they build their chemistry. I think we need to see who the real number 1 running back is going to be. I know Henry Parrish in camp has been doing that. He was the leading rusher last year, but I know that Miami had some high hopes for other guys to see how they would develop. So as far as Tyler's concerned, man, like I think he's comfortable, but this offense, we still really don't know because there's some missing pieces.
By the way, somebody's saying that Amezaga was from Miami High. So you're picking on a stingery, bro.
I apologize, but for whatever reason, that dude, I just remember he would make all kinds of faces in the background. We're trying to interview a guy. He was just kind of, saying things under his breath. I mean, it was a little annoying every time you tried to go in there post-game to get your job done.
Some guy, Kells, says, my restaurant I work at has some crazy stories about Jim Leland back in the 90s.
Yeah,
I'll tell you something. I'll never be the same human being ever again where I had to walk into that office of his in spring training for a couple of weeks, and I had to look at that man shirtless every day at 7 a.m. while he's and trapped in a room with him.
Well, I was going to say secondhand smoke, right? The secondhand smoke probably took a year off your life.
That son of a bitch was lighting one cigarette after another while drinking a chocolate milkshake for breakfast, shirtless, answering our questions. And I think he did everything possible to say, I got to get rid of these sons of bitches. I'll be shirtless. I'll smoke like a chimney. They won't want to be in that room with me too long. I mean, think about that. Back in those days, he was smoking like a chimney inside a room, and you're stuck in there, bro. And you like,
not a good place for health for sure.
And then you come out smelling like shit, bro.
Yeah,
you walk out and you're like, damn, dude, I smell like. Just call me Mr. Marlboro for the rest of the damn day.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, oh man, I smell like Jim Leland now.
We did the who's the worst in the locker room. How about coach wise? Who was your favorite coach to be in a press conference with? Did you have a guy who just
Pat Riley? That's not even close.
Yeah,
it's not even close. It'll never. It's over. Done. History in the archives. My favorite was Pat Riley. Yeah. Even if I had to ask him a tough question, he'd take the challenge on. He wouldn't dick around. He wouldn't. No. He might get pissed at me a little bit, but he'll answer the question. But he was always great, because he understood our job, and so he left meat on the bone. And then he was also the guy that would use us to get to his players too at the same time.
Yeah.
So when there was shrinking violets or whatever else that he wanted to throw out to his players, he would do that. And so for me, my favorite coach of all time to cover, good, bad, indifferent, whatever it was, I love Pat Riley, bro.
Yeah, he's fabulous. I got the chance to go into his office a few times when I was covering the Heat for those 3 years, and every time we walked in there, it felt like the movie The Natural. I don't know if you remember The Natural, right? With the shades kind of drawn. It's kind of dark in there, and you walk in there, and there's just all this memorabilia, like all this stuff from over the years, right? And you could barely see his face because he's kind of sitting in the dark, and you could just see the rings on the table, and it was just, every time I was around him. And what I loved is whenever he had to talk about the Celtics, who he absolutely hated, right? And he would just say that team in green or whatever he would say, and how much he hated Danny Ainge and that was just a phenomenal experience.
So Riley's yours too?
Yeah, no question. No question.
I think most of us that have been on the beat for the last 25 years, if you were on the beat with Riley, I don't know how you name another coach.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I got to tell you, Jimmy was kind of a jerk at times because he was tough, but he was really fun to cover, like really good to cover. Like he also understood our jobs at times. Mm-hmm. He would get a little pissed at us sometimes. Like he would hate that I would sit there with the roster and, track who's here, who's not. And
Right.
he would walk up to me and go, all right, what are you gaining from knowing who's here and who's not? And I would look at him and go, Coach, it's my job. What do you want me to do? This is what I get paid to do.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, somebody's got to do it. And he'd just like jog off or something, say something. But then he would show up on Wednesdays and talk to us off record and all that. So,
Right.
While some of us may have had a couple of run-ins with him, I got to say he was a pretty damn good coach to cover, because he still got our job too at times. And he also was one of those psychologists that he would use us to send messages to his players or a specific player or something like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it wasn't too bad, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah, the guys that use us the right way are the most fun to be around, because they know one way or the other the message is being delivered. So
yeah, you're gonna have bad days, bro. There's gonna be a couple of bad days with those kind of guys because they're super intense. But that's water under the bridge. Whatever. I don't care. That's fine. I can deal with that. But if you're gonna make my job actually, you're gonna respect what I do, then I'm good with that, at least, all right, that's cool. We can have our exchanges and all that kind of stuff. Who's the nicest coach you've ever covered?
Wow, that's a good one. Who was the Puerto Rican manager for the Marlins? He was temporary right after Freddie Gonzalez got fired. I'm trying to remember his name now. Was it Edwin Diaz or Edwin? Edwin. I don't know if it was Edwin Rodriguez. I can't remember, but I just remember being around him, Edwin. He was like the fill-in manager for a year and a half for the Marlins, between all their firings of different guys. And
Todd Bowles was a golden human being.
He was, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of good ones, man. Like there are a lot of good dudes in this profession, that understand you got to do a job. Edwin was the kind of guy who would sit there with you and actually try to teach you something, right? Like, hey, this is why this happened and this is why that happened. And he would talk to you just, some guys don't want to waste any more breath on you than they have to. Edwin was one of those guys who didn't mind taking you to the side and talking to you about something. And I always appreciate that about him.
To bring it full circle, instead of Moises, his dad, Felipe, oh my God. Wow. Yeah. Was that man awesome. Awesome. I walked into his locker room one day, when he was a manager, and like he didn't know me from Adam, and his beat guys were done, and I stayed there talking to him for like 20 more minutes, and he was like awesome. He just got it, it was really, really cool. It reminded me, Dutch Dalton was like that. Darren Dalton. Darren was awesome because Darren would talk to you and then try to teach you at the same time. He'd make you a better reporter when you were done, because he wouldn't talk down to you. He'd actually explain to you what went on, what happened, and why it happened, and all that. And then you walk out of there with this knowledge. You're like, damn, dude, that's freaking awesome. Because Dalton saw, catchers, they see everything completely different than everybody else. And they're able to really, the ones that can talk it, they're able to really describe it and break it down for you. It's really, really cool. That's why they usually become the better managers, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Catchers. Absolutely. Because they've got to be there to study everybody, all the pitchers, all the hitters. I mean, they are the encyclopedia. They are the quarterbacks of baseball, really.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Follow him on Twitter and Manny_Navarro. Catch his work there at The Athletic. Better yet, subscribe like we do. Manny, as always, thank you, my brother. We'll catch up on Friday.
All right, brother. Good talking to you.
You got it. There you go. Manny Navarro. Don't forget caneswear.com, man. You order over $99, you will get free shipping. They got anything and everything practically with a UM logo on it. They've got Dolphins gear, Marlins gear, Panthers gear, Inter Miami gear. What else? Did I miss? I'm missing something? Missing one of the teams. Anyways, all the local teams, man. They've got all that stuff there. 2511 South University Drive in Davie. Go see Brett, Jeff, all the great people out there. They will take care of you at caneswear.com.
This is the Big O Show.